anybody wish to speak on anything outside of the current agenda? Hearing none, can I get an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Items 3 through 9 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 3, approval of the minutes of the January 5 meeting. Number 4, approval of claims. 5, board administration. Approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcel ending in 003, also known as 1419 Silver Street, for Tuesday, January 26th at 4:35 p.m. Number 6, human resources. Approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. B, authorization to initiate hiring process. C, approval of request to deauthorize county position. Item 7, County Auditor's Office. A, approval of Bryce Gerking to Grange Township Trustee. B, approval of Martin Davis to Morgan Township Trustee. C, approval of Camrick Heyman to Morgan Township Trustee. D, approval of Mary Kay Schroeder to Smithland City Council. And E, approval of Mark Wendt to Smithland City Council. Item 8, Community and Economic Development. A, authorize chairman to sign release of mortgage made to Kristen J. Countryman and Jody L. Countryman. B, authorize chairman to sign release of mortgage made to SedCorp, Inc. and MacDon Enterprise, LLC. And C, authorize chairman to sign the release of assignment of leases and rents made to SedCorp, Inc. and MacDon Enterprise, LLC. Last item is 9, Board of Supervisors, approval of chairman's 2021 liaison and committee assignments. Anybody have any discussion on any or which ones? Everybody comfortable with the committee assignments? Sir?
I just have one thing is, we'll communicate this, but on item 7, it shouldn't say approval, it should say receive for every one of those, because you just receive the appointments that are made by those township boards.
Okay. Are you noting that correction then? Okay. Sir?
I was just going to bring up on the minutes if I was an abstention on the previous meeting approval, so if that can just be noted for
Okay.
the approval of the minutes from the meeting prior. I wasn't in attendance, so I abstained. I probably wasn't very clear with my mask on, though.
Oh, I thought I got that, but I'll
Okay.
get it done.
And it may be in there, Pat. I didn't see it. So.
Any other comments or discussion on the consent agenda? I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item 10, Juvenile Detention Center. Approval of request for contract with State of Nebraska for Woodbury County detention bed usage.
Good afternoon. I'm requesting permission to enter into a contract with the state of Nebraska to use any empty bed space we have available. A little backstory is I have contracts with, I think, 4 or 5 Nebraska counties on the eastern side to bring their youth in off the street. It's more economically feasible for them to bring them to Woodbury County than to bring them miles and miles away to have court. This seems to be working good. Once those kids go to court, they become the jurisdiction of the state of Nebraska, so it's a little different there. The state of Nebraska has requested, after some speaking to, that it would be more economically feasible to house kids in Woodbury County instead of taking them to Madison and farther away placements in Nebraska. It also allows parents to have better access to their children because we're just a few miles away. And also, there's a state of Nebraska probation office in South Sioux. It's also a lot easier for them to visit their kids and get them to go to court. So I'm asking to approve this contract. Same rate as everybody else, $150 a day. Does anybody have any questions?
I'll move the approval.
I'll second for discussion.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor, and you had some,
I just wanted to ask, have you talked to them about, and I know this is maybe a difficult projection, but how many youth that they,
Yeah, I thought Dennis was going to ask you that.
yeah, I preempted him, so,
I'd like to make any kind of prediction, but with COVID, nothing is what I predicted from last year.
okay.
But they seem pretty excited about this as much as I am, so
Okay.
they're constantly on me over email to push this, get it going. It's just way easier for them. A lot of their beds are full, a lot of them are far away. So, when they come, because I have taken a few of these kids, they stay for 6-8 weeks, so extended period of time. But,
stay for how long, excuse me?
6 to 8 weeks, sometimes longer.
Okay.
Because at that point, they're adjudicated, they've already basically serving their time, so. But, we could go in spurts of weeks without having any, so I could make a prediction next year better, but,
Yeah.
I can't, nothing I predicted last year came true this year, so.
So I hear you saying don't predicate or
Yeah.
budget based on,
A liar, so yeah.
okay, thank you.
One question, when we drafted this contract, Matthew was chairman, so my signage page says signature from Matthew. I don't have a problem with Matthew still signing it. I don't know if that's an issue for anyone else.
Does this look familiar? Yeah, it's got my name on there for now. So.
You did? Never mind. Jesus. Were we talking about raises yet?
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
There you.
Item 11, approval of presentation for proclamation, approval of and presentation of proclamation for National Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention Month, and I don't have that in front of me, I don't think. There we go. Woodbury County, Iowa, proclamation, whereas the United States was founded upon the principle that all people are created with the inalienable right to freedom, and added the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, making slavery illegal, and whereas slavery within the United States today is most often found in the form of forced labor and sex trafficking, which weakens our social fabric, increases violence and organized crime, and debases our humanity, and whereas this problem is found even within our own community, and whereas every business, community organization, faith community, family, and individual can make a difference by choosing products that are not made by forced labor, by working to protect our young people from sexual exploitation, by addressing the problems of internet sex trafficking and pornography, and by becoming more aware of the problem and possible solutions. Now therefore, Woodbury County Board of Supervisors do hereby proclaim the month of January 2021 as Slavery and Human Trafficking Prevention and Awareness Month. Any questions? Didn't we usually have a person in here in the past? Okay. Okay. Well, I think personally that entertaining discussion on this, that some of these forced laborers, sexual exploitation, and some of these things are some of the most absurd and obscene things that a person can do to another human being is disgusting. I wholeheartedly support this proclamation. Other comments?
That second?
I will take that as a first.
I thought maybe you were, yep.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. We're a little bit early on the advisor supposed to be at 4:45?
We've got a while.
We're way early.
We're way early.
All right, item 13, secondary roads.
Mark Nara, Woodbury County Engineer. I have a set of plans for board approval. It's for Project ER Repair in 145. This is the project that we just added to the program, place riprap along the north side of County Route D12 near the West Fork of the Little Sioux Bridge, where we have the channel that's been migrating toward our roadway. We're targeting a June 2018 or 2021 loan. June 18, 2021.
Okay. I'll move approval. Motion by DeWitt, second by Wright. Any other comments, questions for Mark? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Item 14, Board of Supervisors, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this agenda item is to explore options for offering an early retirement program as a cost savings measure for Woodbury County. And as you know, early retirement programs can be used by governmental entities to incentivize retiring at a cost savings. So I just want to be clear, this would be something that would be voluntary by any employee that would look at his or her personal and financial situation and think that this would be in the best interest. So new hires can sometimes realize savings in comparison to more veteran employees, though obviously we value our veteran employees. With financial incentives, there can be potential cost savings. So this item really is to begin the process of exploring this. I know that at one time we may have done so and may have had implementation of an early retirement program, but we can maximize payroll, value our seasoned and more veteran experienced directors and employees, and at the same time give them options. And so with that, what I'm looking to do here is to approve a work group or committee consisting of 2 supervisors, our HR director, our budget analyst, someone from the auditor's office, and our assistant county attorney to visit about what other counties and entities offer. I know the school district has offered an early retirement program in various forms over the past few years to some success. And then come to make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors. And that's not to say that they'll even recommend this is what form it should take, if one at all. And then after that initial work group meets, I know Supervisor Ung has done some really good work on the policy committee. That may be yet another means of vetting or hearing or another forum to do so. But the initial motion would be to approve this kind of work committee and then go from there. So those are my opening comments.
I think this would be, do you have a dollar amount that you think we might be able to save, or are you just looking, testing the waters here on?
Yeah, I think it depends. I talked to Melissa a little bit, and it's really that, and if you want to talk about this at all, Melissa, but it's really kind of that sweet spot between, let's say, 61 and 65, wherein there's individuals who say financially, either through Social Security or otherwise, a lot of times it comes down to benefits, we know. We know that there's certain a cost for family benefits, and so making that calculation. So I looked to Melissa to see, how many people would be even eligible in that kind of window, and then, who knows exactly, so.
Sure. Melissa Thomas, Human Resources Director. I have kind of looked at how many employees would be available in that window. I've also pulled information from other counties around the state and to see what they offer, if they do offer an early retirement. I've pulled off some information from the city schools. And it just seems like every plan is just a little bit different. So I think this committee would be a great way to sit down and figure out if any would be right for the county. So it's just very interesting, all the different variables that can come into play.
Do you have a timeline that you wanted to get this done by, Mr. Taylor?
Thinking by tomorrow? No, I think if somewhere.
Before budget season is over, or before certification, or?
I think something reasonable would be maybe the next 4, 6, 8 weeks, but I would sort of leave that up to the committee rather than months and months, or next week. That seems like it'd be maybe a reasonable timeline to at least come up with.
Excuse me, even if we don't get it done this fiscal year, you're not going to be up It'd still be a money savings?
I think it could be. I think this initial step anyway, could come back and say, there's really not the cost savings there given, or could say, this looks really good because here's what 5 other counties are doing. So this is just kind of the initial, or I would hope in the next 4 to 6 weeks there might be a recommendation to come back.
I would, and if, like you said, within this fiscal year, I do obviously believe that people need time to plan that out too. So the earlier, if we decide to go forward with this, I think the earlier we can decide on the policy, the more then people can prepare for themselves for the retirement and what would that include.
Just to give you one example that I've thought of, that this would be of assistance. My most senior employees get 5 weeks of vacation a year.
Mark?
One employee gets 2. That's 3 weeks of, that's 3 weeks of productive labor that we get out of the younger people than our experience. And even though we are spending the same amount of money in salary, we're returning more labor. We've seen that turnover over my 12 years here. When I got here, our average age was 57. And we have many senior employees for more than 25 years. We still have quite a few. And biggest barrier is insurance. It's not pension or it's not IBERS. It's things like insurance, their health insurance, and it inhibits their ability to leave early. Just a thought.
Yeah, and Mark's department would be distinct since within their union contract, they don't move up with seniority as far as wage goes. So there would be the savings with him, as you mentioned, vacation, sick time, et cetera. So looking forward. Thank you.
I would like to be one of the 2 supervisors unless there's 2 others that want to get feisty about it. I'm here most days anyway. Anybody else? Just thinking out loud.
I know,
Interested, depending on the timing of the meetings.
First of all, I'll move approval.
I'll second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor. Is this anything that would have to be decided today, Mr. Auditor, on who the members are?
No, we just improve that there's a committee there with the chairperson to set the members.
Okay. If I was gonna, well, we'll figure that out later then. Any other discussion on this?
I just want to say, I know like a lot of these I've paid attention to in the past don't actually pan out to save the governments as much money as what they thought. I know some situations where, you have a senior person retire and all of a sudden you realize you can't replace him with just one person, or sometimes it takes time and a half because that person is actually really good at what they do. So, I mean, that's got to be part of what you figure in there too.
We don't know if we don't ask.
That's true. So, yeah, I'm fine with
And
looking
it doesn't
into
look
it.
like there's gonna cost us any money to do this, so.
Yeah, it doesn't cost anything to research or form the committee or ask others what they've done or found. So I'm supportive of that. I'm just, there's got to be a caution out there that we don't just do this because we think it's going to work and then have it come back to bite us. So that's.
I'm sure Dennis has already said what our experience was the first time we did this in visiting with you, but it was the same thing that was just brought up, is that typically when you look at early retirement, what you're looking for is folks that come in at a lower wage, be able to get some savings from that, but it was the insurance that always killed it off. So just as long as we know that going into it, it doesn't hurt to take a look at it again.
And it'd be interesting, and we were talking about that too, but it'd be interesting to see in some structures, counties or a governmental agency will pick up 100% of the insurance cost, given that the wage difference or differential is going to be significant. But I've also heard of others where, because of that, would otherwise be a wash, it's 75% that the county or the agents, so I think there's some things that we could look at, but I'm appreciative of everyone's willingness to at least look, so.
Have you, I think you mentioned the school district. How formed a policy or procedure do they have? Have they followed it for many years, or is there anything we could get from them?
I'm sure in terms of, Melissa, you may know somebody who works for the school district, and They've had various forms over the years that have come in and out.
It depends on the years of service. And also, it required a deadline and for somebody to commit to do this. So, you know, that was a little bit different. It had a stipend for so many quarters, and full-time and part-time, and it was prorated. So, you know, it's a good plan, and I'm sure it works for them. So
I think there's a format of paying a stipend per quarters or years of service, or picking up a portion of the health insurance, and probably everywhere in between.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Well, I think between the expertise of our HR director and, of course, the financial wizardry of Dennis Butler, we'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly, whether we can save some money or not. Any other comments?
The only comment I have is we need to focus on tax funds. Now, we talk about secondary roads. We could retire 60 people. It isn't going to matter because he has to levy the minimum levy no matter what. So really, we need to focus where it hit our rural basic, our general sub, and other funds we give allocations to. Secondary roads is immaterial. I hate to say that, but we have to back into it.
Well, but Dennis, he was just saying it would help for manpower and vacation, so
That's the only place.
financial is just one of the avenues.
Right.
And couldn't you dedicate resources to other areas that secondary roads might need?
True.
Okay.
But we force balance. He works his budget around the minimum levy.
Right. So I think in terms of a tax reduction, yeah, you're right.
Potential there.
Once again, any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. 14B, approve budget items for cost savings to include consideration of belonging reserve levels.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So this is a kind of a two-part item. The first is just informational, a little bit of a discussion, and that's that last week we took steps to bridge the gap in order to potentially move toward trying to hold the tax levies flat. We looked at over $1.47 million in order to keep flat the three basic funds, I should say, in general basic, supplemental, and rural basic. And really in discussions with Dennis over this past week, it seems to me if we're going to look at the sale of the county farm, I know we're waiting on an appraisal, or any other reduction from general basic reserves that we at least talked about last week, that it might make sense to do so on a 2-year basis, meaning that we don't have a 1-year problem, we have a 2-year problem. So whether that is dedicating 2/3 of any sale of the county farm proceeds to this year and 1/3 to next year, or whether it would be reducing from 18.1 to 16.5 and then 16.5 to 15, that whatever we do, I think it makes sense to realize as a 2-year problem and maybe to have a 2-year plan. With that being said, those are just, it's not really the item before you other than that as background, but that as we continue to look at different funds, we did talk last week about the EMS loan fund and a current position of approximately $190,000 that has not been utilized regularly over the 4 years. Did speak to Gary, Dave Amick, and some other folks, and would like to put before you that we have as a county sponsored bank qualified bonds of up to $10 million annually from 501c3s. I know that different entities come before us and look for this. And so what I'd like to at least begin the discussion on today is to see if this might be a means of helping those volunteer fire and rescue that are interested in purchasing this kind of equipment to maybe even a greater degree than having an approximately $200,000 balance just in case this is needed. And again, I've heard that this has been a very good program. So with that, just thought that we could begin the discussion today and ask if we want to keep the status quo, eliminate the fund, reduce it to a certain amount, wait on it and see the probability or likelihood that these entities could have that nonprofit status if they don't already. So with that, those are my opening comments.
Okay. Discussion from the board?
So on here, it shows the lowering of reserve levels in general basic. What is the proposed reduction?
Yeah, so for right now, we had talked at least what would accomplish gaining 876,000 would be going from 18 to 15%. That's just informationally to say that may be an option if anybody supports it. But really what's in front of us as far as the approval or the discussion at hand would be the EMS fund.
Okay. That was just kind of included in the,
Yeah, like here's what we're facing as a potential with the farm, the reserve level, and then this one, and this is the one that we started discussing last week, and that I would be asking for some sort of action on if the board so sees.
I'm not particularly comfortable dropping our reserves that low. We ourselves have a policy on the county level of 20%. And it just can't help but feel like we're trying to paint ourselves into a corner, and I'm not, I mean, it's a complex issue, and it makes perfect sense when Mr. Butler explains it to me, but 5 minutes later, I'm lost again. But it's one of those things, I don't want to get in trouble financially, and I think we've set our county policy. We've got county policies for a reason, whether some have more gravity or weight to them or more importance than others, I'm sure there are. But I think this is one where we should watch our dollars. And according to Mr. Butler, I think you said we're right where we need to be right now with the 1.4 we took out of last week's budget.
Yeah, you actually have your tax rate the same as the current year for general basic, general sup, and rural basic. The only word, and I expressed this to Jeremy too, the only caution I have is our tax asking with a 2% cap until you have to go to the second public hearing. If you take reserves and reduce in those three funds, it reduces our base. So next year our base will be 400,000 less. So you don't want to get in the trap where you keep reducing your base and we have ongoing expenses increasing because reserve is a one-time shot. Now in our case, we're talking 2 years.
So can I just?
Yeah?
Okay. So two things. When we make the statement that the tax rate is the same with general basic, that's true in terms of the general basic fund and its impact on the levy, right? We're on the same page.
Yes.
But if you look at how many dollars per thousand, once you add in debt service, because it's countywide, that's going to go up, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Two separate issues here.
Right. So I just want to be careful that we recognize that at the same time, and that the reserve level here would be trying to, and I don't disagree whether it's wise fiscal sense or not. I think that's a healthy debate, and your points are all well taken. I just want to make sure that we're clear that still countywide, we've got, if it's the will of the board to do, we've got some work to do. I just don't want to imply that countywide, we're all the same.
We're just referring to three tax funds the board can control. Debt service and mental health, we can't control. The board can't control.
And then the second one is, on the reserve level, I have been very appreciative of your concerns in terms of if it's a one-year shot, then next year you've got to make that up.
Correct.
Which is why this would, and I know this really isn't the thing that we're asking for action on, but if it does go that way, I do think it's wiser for it to be a 2-year thing, right? So you go.
Yeah, the board's going to go this way, better off 2 years.
Okay.
It's 800, do 400 this year, 400 next year. Correct.
Okay.
But we got to realize we're reducing our tax base, and it gives you less ability at the 2%. And you never can make it up unless you increase tax by dramatic. The next year you increase taxes a lot, then your base goes back up. But I don't see that the sentiment of the board, increasing taxes just to build our base back up. And reserves should be used a lot of times for one-time expenses. They'll never occur again. And this is reoccurring expenses every year for the life of the county.
What is reoccurring?
But
What's reoccurring?
expenses, all we're doing is expenses to support the basic operating of the Woodbury County. These aren't one-time expense like we're going out and buy a road grader for $400,000, that's a one-time shot.
So, and this is, I discussed a little bit this with Dennis earlier. So like, I feel like a lot of the cuts we've made so far have been from not our actual expenditures, but from like borrowing from our reserves, other than like secondary roads a little bit there. So like, you know, maybe we look at some of our vehicle usage, some of our, you know, how many parking spots we're paying for that maybe we don't need to. You know, I'd like to make, you know, some looks at that, because that's your general operating, you know, your actual operating expense or your capital expense moving forward. So I see us, if we use too much reserve level here, I'm concerned because, you know, he brings up the 2% next year. Well, we brought our reserves down to here, but our operating still grew at 2%, and next year they're going to grow another 2%. But yet we don't have that reserve built up. With next year's dollars, we're definitely going to go over that 2% growth. So the 2-year outlook on it is not as good, even though it might look good this year. And then my fear is that if we use the sale of that county farm then in the budget, you know, that affects our 2% too, would it not?
No, if we do what Jeremy's recommending, if it sells for $1 million, you take $500,000 this year and $500,000 next year against your debt service.
Okay,
Debt
so
service,
against
county
debt
mental health
service.
are exempt from the 2%.
So you could use it towards the mental health. And so our mental health levy went up by what, was it 3 cents?
Yeah, not very, 140,000 went up, this proposal at the moment.
So it's just under 3 cents maybe.
Yeah, about that.
So
That's maybe.
it would be nice to be able to cut, to compensate for that increase.
Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
The reason I ask you what expenses are we talking about, and that's a huge generalized term, right? I like to think of this as we have this debt service that we're paying on for the new jail. We have a bridge for a 3rd-year plan and a 4th year, 5th year, and that's federal inmates and that we hope to get to. So there's this one-time expense this year, one-time expense next year, and we're looking.
Yes, on the debt service.
Right. So we're looking for, if that curve is like this, to flatten that as much as is possible. So if you, let's just say we have 400,000 this year and 400,000 next year of a one-time shot, that 3.4 has gone down to 3 million this year and 3 million next year. That truly is a one-time expense those 2 years, assuming that in the 3rd year and beyond. You see what I'm saying? If we use it for something like mental health services, that it, you know, that's going to go up the next year and it's going to stay. So that's, in my mind, being the slowest one up here, that helps.
Best place to use is debt service, because like Jeremy's stating, your operating costs for mental health are going to continue to go up. They aren't going down.
So are you suggesting then cutting the reserves but then putting it in debt service?
No, not general basic reserves.
Or is that
what you're saying?
that's the sale of the, okay.
Right. My biggest thing is if you have whatever you do in terms of a one-time gain of funds, which would be the sale of any property or a reserve level lowering, you all have convinced me, meaning two, that it's a good 2-year, it's a 2-year problem, so there should be a 2-year plan. Rather than, I mean, we could maybe close this gap this 1st year and then we're facing it the 2nd. So.
One more thing that I don't want to get in the habit of is assuming we're going to get top dollar for that farm if it sells. I mean, that's one thing that scares me, is that we're going to put all our eggs in selling that piece of ground, and we're thinking it's going to get X dollars, and you can appraise it for $75 million, but if market value doesn't pay more than $1.5 million, then it's only worth $1.5 million. And that's that I don't want to get us into trouble looking at that with too much optimism, sir.
Two things. I want us to explore this, because we're looking at 3.4 debt service this year. And what's the number next year, Dennis?
3.4.
3.4.
It's pretty stable going
So
through.
it's
It's very interesting.
6.8 over 2 years. So I think at this point, we're just exploring. We're trying to find, is there a means of making up that $6.8 million through sell the farm, through looking for places to save in other areas, in other departments, and asking people asking directors to understand. The idea is, this was a $50 million investment for our community, and this is a very meaningful investment for our community, and we're asking everybody to tighten up the belt to pay for this item that's extremely important for us. And I think at this point, we're just trying to explore the issue a little bit more. I don't think we're not committing to anything at this point. I think when we get to the end of the budget cycle, after the several weeks process, we're going to know whether or not it's meaningful to sell that farm for $1.5 million or 2.1. We'll know at that point whether or not $2 million is going to be meaningful or not, because we still owe $5 million. You know, if we get it, so as it is, we know that people's taxes are going to go up by 70 cents per $1,000 of value if we don't find a way to address the debt service issue this year and next year. So, and I guess the other question I wanted to ask is, talking dollars and cents for a second. What is the balance of the general basic fund in dollars and cents?
Fiscal year June 30th, around 5.2 million, which was 18.1% of our expenditures.
Okay, and then so what is that balance?
It's going to be about the same this year.
16.5.
Might be a little less because of Corona. Just give you examples. Ryan was here, you know, we're down about 100,000 general stuff because of juvenile care, because of Corona. The jail is down work release, room and board because of Corona. And they could address that better than I could, but they are down revenues, and for next year, they estimate hardly any revenues for room and board. Now, that may be true or false, depends on Corona. So if they're underestimating these, and Corona did get the room and board, the juvenile care, work release, electronic monitoring, whatever, or other facets too, like interest on investments, interest on penalty, that could make up the difference of the 400,000, say if that's the magic number that we're moving over debt service. How do we make up that 400,000? Well, that's through the revenues, or people don't spend their budgets. And if you look overall in the general basic, when we get to the end of the year, after the rules and everything, we probably have $100,000 spent that we've taxed for, that we needed money for, that goes back in the reserves. So the question would be, how do we replenish the reserves to get back to 18% or 20% after we use these reserves? These are instances, once this thing gets over with, our revenue should go back up. And I stated several different cases, and the Sheriff, Tony could address this in the jail too. It has affected jail income coming in. And it can't be helped. You can't affect the whole jail with coronavirus, and we have major problems, but this is a problem with revenue coming in, same way juvenile detention. So if the board decides to go with 400,000 each year, there is possibilities drawing this money back in that we don't know about, because we can't predict the future really, could rebuild those reserves back to 18 and hopefully eventually get back to 20. Statewide, the top 10 counties, we are far the lowest on cash reserves, 18.1. There's some as high as 60, 70%. And the next one closest, Potawatomi, 26%. So our 20% isn't bad, but we're in a situation, not every county's building a $50 million jail either, and having a spike that the voters approve, but there is a spike there. Most counties don't have this. In fact, very few that I know are building a $50 million jail. But the voters approved it. Now we're trying to find ways to offset some for 2 years. The third year, we should come back.
We want to lower that spike. We want to lower all the way.
And this is the way with the farm, if the board decides to sell it, depends on the money. And instead of using the 400,000 cash reserve general basic, we transfer that money over to debt service, which reduces the tax rate, which doesn't affect our tax base on that 2% cap. Quite a bit there, and I hope.
So how does it not affect it, you say? Because we're leveraging it in general reserve and then transferring it.
No, we're using reserves on general basic, 400,000, say if that's a magic number, we're transferring those reserves over to debt service to offset the tax levy in debt service for 2 years.
Okay.
And a sale farm, 2 years.
Can I mention something that Rocky mentioned earlier? You talked about if we get into a box on the sale of the farm and it doesn't bring what we want. I think we can, and Joshua and I talked about this a little bit. I think we can set a price that would be acceptable for the board and then not be obligated unless that price was met. Is that true, or am I mischaracterizing?
Yeah, I think it could be, I mean, you could set a reserve auction and, you could discuss with the auctioneer or whoever we would use to facilitate the sale, what that would look like as far as if you would advertise it ahead of time or not and things like that. But, I mean, the options are limitless as far as what you want that actual sale to look like and the process for that.
So if we said as a board, this is the minimum acceptable price, and we went through this thing and didn't get it, we'll still walk away, turn around and do a lease?
As auctions go, as I understand them, yeah.
Right, as long as you make that decision ahead of time, whether you'd have like a reserve auction or I mean, you could even do a sealed bid and, sealed bids or whatever that looks like. But as long as you're upfront in the beginning, as far as, you're reserving the right to reject any bids, any and all bids, then you should be able to do that.
And Mark, you did a study on that, you said 2 years ago, on whether or not it was
4 years ago, 2016.
And how many years was the break even for?
Break even between what I estimate to be rough sale based off the Breezy farm we bought over by Correctionville was 21 years. After 21 years, it was profit. 21 years roughly break even for sale.
Were you taking into account future values of land?
I was taking into account the property taxes likely to be received once it was in a farm, but the valuation used for taxation purposes is much lower than what the sales value would be. When you look at the neighboring 40 and 80 acre parcels, most of them are valued for taxation purposes at roughly $1,500 an acre. And, so you're not looking at the $7,500 an acre price I was looking at for sale. So instead of $60,000 a year, you'd be netting about 11 each year on property taxes. And that's assuming it's used as ag ground.
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
Last week's agenda item with Supervisor Taylor and myself had a portion that was my doing that stated this option of reducing reserves would be done in conjunction if it was done with the sale of the farm. And I think that that's where I stand on it. I think we should be very cautious in reducing reserves unless there is that assurance that it will actually mean something. And I think that's understood. But it is a question, open question for the board. We have this cost. Is it a 1 year? Is it a 1 year worst case scenario, second year best case scenario? Or is it a 2 year just okay scenario? But if we are going to be reducing reserves, I think we're putting the cart a little bit before the horse. If we're talking about it before we're moving on as fast as we can, the option of seeing if this can sell within this budget year and what procedures we need to pass to make sure we get the right price for it. Because we don't want to rush the sale and get a value that is not as good as what we'd get if we started earlier on in the year. So that's the clincher for me is that sale. What we're talking about now is kind of end of the budget process as far as I'm concerned. Maybe we could get to the action item portion of this. Dennis?
I have one more thing on caution of using reserves. The board here last week is committed to district health, County Mango's Hammer, and other agencies that if they run out of money, that we'll have money to funnel over to them in relation to other items that are public health, safety, assistance to veterans, general relief, autopsies, whatever, we need to make sure we have enough money on hand without devastating our reserves. I hate to use that word, a lot of people use it, but we need to make sure we don't use all of our money up to try to save something we have flat already, something we have that we can't control. But there's instances where we may have to come up with some reserves, so we gotta be careful how far we draw them down. I just want to throw that in, as that's another ingredient to this whole process of balancing the budget.
Not to beat a dead horse, if I can borrow your analogy, but Dennis, talking about going down to 16 and a half, the counties have been below that before, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so how low has the county been?
Well, I don't
10.8, 10.8, 10.9?
One time we were, because I think that year they did use reserves.
Okay. And I'm not saying that's where the ideal place to be. I'm just saying that I think that year we've come back. And, but again, I agree that this is a discussion for much later in order to act on that. And I think you all have very good points, so.
I guess that, when they had that 10.8%, they didn't have the law saying that if, you're allowing your government to grow by about 2% or that guidepost, so, that has changed. But yeah, I guess to Matthew's point on the actual agenda item then, I guess if no consideration on reserve levels, we should discuss the reducing of voluntary EMS funds, so.
So with that, I wonder if,
Well, we've done the consideration, so shall we move on to the EMS fund? Okay.
Gary Brown, Woodbury County Emergency Services. I watched the board meeting from last week, and I'll try to address some of the questions that came up. The EMS loan fund was started with $150,000 of federal revenue sharing back in 1988. It was actually established October 31st, 1988 by the Board of Supervisors. The federal revenue sharing dollars had no strings attached. They were basically revenue sharing dollars, so it would be no problem how they're used. We started this fund to help out the volunteer ambulance services. I think everybody agrees that we're trying to support them, and the more we can help keep them alive, the longer we put off the problem of a countywide EMS transporting system. When we started buying ambulances with this fund, a top drawer ambulance would cost you about $60,000. Anthon had a demo model over last week to look at, $212,000, and Lawton had a demo model to look at, it was $184,000. So the dollars don't go as far, which is good. And yes, we haven't loaned any money out of this in a while because the squads are trying to make these ambulances last longer, quite honestly, because of their costs. The other thing that's taken some pressure off of the fund is most of the services now in the county are using a professional billing service. So we're bringing in more revenue for them. They're bringing in more revenue for themselves than they have in the past. So that's been a big benefit to them. We had our vaccine clinic the other night at Claiming Hill for EMS, so I had a chance to speak to a lot of the EMS service directors. And there's a possibility that 2 of them would be looking for loan fund money in the next 6 to 12 months. I've had a chance to discuss at length with Jeremy the idea of the 501c3 loan program through the board, and I don't know enough, but what I can tell you is also at the vaccine clinic, I polled several of the services to find out if they were 501c3s. Most of them are not. Most of them have a 501c3 in the background. It's the firefighters fund, it's the ladies auxiliary fund, it's where they take their fundraiser money and put it, so they buy jackets and hats and those kind of things through their 501c3. And they do use their 501c3s to apply for like MER grants and some of those things. So do I think we need the EMS loan fund forever? I think there needs to be a way for us to help out the fire and EMS squads in the county and partner with them. I would be very interested in spending some time looking at the 501c3 concept and borrowing through the board. But I think we need some time to bring that forward all the way. So I would not be in favor of eliminating the EMS loan fund at this time. I feel like we need to give that, I need to get some people in the room that run these services and get their feedback. I was very informal the other night at the shot clinic, but it's been hard for us to meet either as fire or EMS with COVID. We can't bring all the EMS leadership together in one room and then spread COVID to each other and not have our EMS providers. So it's kind of where I'm at. I feel like there's a lot of, I like the idea of this 501c3 and up to $10 million because this stuff costs a lot of money nowadays.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it does, but I guess where I'm at, and I'm just here. So does the federal revenue sharing program even exist anymore? Okay, I mean, with the 501c3, I guess I'm wondering, okay, what if two departments came and wanted to borrow a combined $400,000? What do we do?
Well, we've had really good cooperation amongst the services out there. They all kind of give us a heads up when they're looking at it. They give us kind of lead time, and then we, through the association, will ping all the services and say, hey, we've got these two. We haven't lent 80% on an ambulance in quite some time. We're doing smaller loans because the services do want to share the pot and not, I guess the way to say it is they'd rather come up with some of their own money and borrow $50,000 from the fund than keep their own money in the bank and borrow more from the fund because they want it to be available for the other services. They're very good about that.
Do you know, who are the two that are looking right now? So,
Lund and Anthem.
okay. And do you know what their approximate purchase cost would be, or?
No, it really depends on, I mean, they're just starting the shopping process, looking at, there's several different vendors that they'll shop with. And then also, some of it comes into what their trade-in's worth, what the dealers will give them for their trade-in. So I could see, $100,000 easily from those two services.
Combined?
Huh?
Combined?
Combined.
Okay.
But then I don't, like I said, I didn't get to talk to all the service directors the other night. I talked to several of them, but by far I did not get to all of them. So I really like the idea of the 501c3 thing and have it up to $10 million. Well, that would be shared with other entities as well. But, sometimes these services like us, they get behind on their purchasing and they need some extra help to get their fleet back up to speed. And so I'm totally into exploring what we can do.
Well, that's where I'm at. I'm sitting here thinking maybe this money that's sitting here, I mean, for lack of a better word, is sitting here doing nothing. Maybe this federal revenue sharing thing has lived its useful life, and it's time between the 501c3s and everything else that we just start asking questions. And if this money hasn't been used in almost 4 years or 4 years, whatever it was, 'cause I think Mobile borrowed money from us last time.
Both borrowed money recently.
Okay, but that's a fair amount of money that's just sitting there doing nothing, and we have need and use for the money. And if there's better programs moving forward that can take care of these issues, I think we should take a hard look at it.
I think we should too, and I think we need to get some time to look at this 501c3, see how many of the services are, or what it would take for them to become 501c3s, what that expense would be, and then transition out of this in the future, if that makes sense. But it's kind of sudden to pull it all together in a matter of a few weeks to me.
At what level would you be comfortable with that fund being maintained to get through the year or until those conversations can take place?
I read lips most of the time.
Sure. At what level, right now we're at 190K, at what level would you feel comfortable reducing that to so that you feel comfortable you can respond if there's a need to, pending those conversations about setting up the 501c3s?
I mean, that's the board's, I'll work with whatever you give me, but I will admit the demand on the fund has not been as great as it once was. But like I said, the services are trying to make the rigs last longer because they cost so awful much. They used to trade at 30, 40,000 miles, which was a high mileage for a volunteer ambulance service because it sets a lot. And now they're trying to get, the mileage up their way because you trade in an ambulance, you get nothing for it, really. There's very little value in a used ambulance. You can buy them on eBay for $1,500 to $3,000 a piece all day long.
Dennis?
if these entities do, or fire department do go 501c3, they can go to each individual town. Mobile happens to go to Mobile. Every town can go up to 10 million bank qualified loans. Why does Woodbury County Supervisors have to get involved in that? Why can't each town do it? It doesn't affect their debt rate or debt limits. It doesn't put them on any liability. All it's doing is giving the tax 501c3 a better interest rate to the bank and gives the bank tax advantage on the loan. So why would Woodbury County want to go into loan business with fire departments? Why don't the towns do it? They all got 10 million fees every calendar year. And I don't think any of them are using it.
Just a thought, and I'm not sharing a definitive opinion, but I don't know, do we know if there's a conflict of interest between a city doing that with one of its own somewhat connected nonprofits?
That'd be a legal question.
Right, and then the other one is no skin off our back in terms of our debt capacity when we do one of these bank qualified loans, right?
Doesn't affect them either.
Right. So I guess the only thing to be, my response would be, and I'm not saying it's the statutory requirement of any county or ours, but maybe something that we could still help out in terms of being the parent sponsor, if that's the right term, while at the same time not doing it through having monies that are sitting there not utilized every year. So just a thought.
When we do our CIP loans, those are bank qualified, so if we do $1 million, that $1 million comes off the 10. We've never used it all up. In all the years I've been, we've never used the whole 10 million out.
Okay, a couple things briefly. We are coming up against a 4:45 set time. Is there any appetite for, this is my motion, I guess, taking that, whatever it is, down to $50,000, so there's still some usable money in that account, and then we will still maintain that until, if and until these entities outside in the rural districts, the rural towns and so forth, get something up to speed on their 501s.
So are we going to transfer that to debt levy or debt service, or what are we doing with it?
I would say it should go to debt service. You don't want to reduce your tax askings and the 3 funds you control. It's a one-time shot. You know, this money coming in, and it could be $134,000. That should go to a one-time expenditure, which would be debt service. And you could split that in 2 years too, or 1 year.
Do we have the exact, I guess my motion would be to drop that fund balance down to $50,000 with whatever it is, putting the money into debt service.
Yes, and it's the option of the board. You want to use it all first year or split it up.
With the option by the board.
Right.
That's my motion.
I think the fund balance in there is right around $184,000 now.
Here's the fund balance. 180,770.
So we'd be gaining 130,000 and change.
Just, if I could add, and I don't know if you need a second before I talk for the motion about, but we lend that money for 5 years. So one service could come in tomorrow and borrow $50,000 and the loan fund is done for, until it's replenished over 5 years. I know that we've got 2 services looking, and it's going to be in excess of $50,000 this year. You know, we started with $150,000, and the balance now over $150,000 has all come from interest earned on the money when it's not been lent out. So the fund has done pretty well, and I just think 50,000 is probably I mean, if that's what it is, but.
Well, and not to interrupt you, Gary, but I'm thinking it would give the smaller communities or the smaller entities, the volunteers, the VFDs, VFAs, kind of a kick in the pants to get going on the 501. I mean, we're still maintaining it, whatever the case may be. Nobody has that crystal ball.
I guess I feel like I wish I had a little more time to let them know this was coming and get a little more data from because they all know the fund is there. And like I said, I've not had a chance to really sit down with every one of the service directors and know what the demand is going to be. I will tell you the demand has been less because we're making them last longer and we're getting more revenue.
Right.
In. So.
We're at a 4:45 set time. Dennis, if you can do it quickly.
Quickly, they still, I think I'll have outstanding loan of $20,000. up to 50, so it actually is 70,000 there. He still has one more loan payment's not in that balance there.
Which is coming in when?
Is it next year or this year? Yeah. I know there's 120,000 coming in, or it's this
I
year. next year.
don't have it, Dennis. Got everything else but
That
that.
actually is even 70,000 now. 50.
All right, we have a motion so far, no second, but we are at a hard, unless somebody wants to second it.
Let's just move to the 445 and get that done.
We'll move to the 445, Community and Economic Development. Public hearing on application for zoning district designation mapping. Mr. Gleiser.
Thank you, David Gleiser, Community Economic Development Director. I'm going to go ahead and read my recommendation into the record. Dustin Joseph Steinecke, owner of parcel 894235100010, which is located in the southeast quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 35, Township 89 North, Range 42 West, which is in the Union Township, and is addressed as 1548 Highway 31 in Correctionville, is requesting to rezone his 1.39 acre parcel from the Agricultural Preservation Zoning District to the Limited Industrial Zoning District for future commercial use. If approved, the applicant intends to build a 36 by 90-foot building to facilitate the operation of his trucking business, Silver Steel Trucking. The property is not located in the floodplain, and according to the county's summary of table of land uses, truck terminals for non-home occupation use, they are not allowed in the Agricultural Preservation Zoning District, but they are allowed in the Limited Industrial and General Industrial Zoning Districts. The purpose of an amendment to the zoning ordinance map is intended to reflect the changing use and development patterns in the county and to move the map into compliance with the county's adopted long-range comprehensive plan. The Community Economic Development staff have supported the applicant's request, and we have recommended approval of the mapping amendment. The applicant's 1.39 acre parcel is actually below the 3 acre minimum for the Limited Industrial Zoning District, and so he has had to apply for a variance application concurrently with this mapping amendment. Both are dependent on each other. On December 28th, the Zoning Commission held a public hearing on the application to amend the zoning map and voted unanimously to recommend approval to the board. And on January 4th, the Board of Adjustment held its public hearing on the variance application, and they also voted unanimously to approve the request. It's a good project. There's a mix of commercial, residential, and agricultural uses in that neighborhood. In 2005, when the county adopted its current future land use map, we mapped that area out as transitional agriculture, which means that at the time we thought it would be transitioning to residential development. In recent years, land ownership has changed. There have been some new commercial developments along Highway 25 and annexation into Correctionville. Specifically, the Dollar General store was built, and the owner of a large portion of that land in that neighborhood is open to selling that land for other types of development. The applicant has provided a long list of adjacent property owners that support the project, as well as a written letter from the City of Correctionville. The City of Correctionville, in their future land use map, and according to their comprehensive plan, this is an area that they believe the city will grow, annex, and rezone it to a light industrial zoning district. Their light industrial zoning district is basically the same as our limited industrial, and so therefore, the recommendation is to approve.
I'll move the approval, or I guess, do we got a public hearing, so I guess anything to be heard on the public, I guess.
We are in the public hearing now.
I do believe the applicant is on the call if
Okay.
you have any questions for him or myself or Dan.
That's Mr. Steinecke.
Yes, sir.
Yep. Hello.
All right.
I'll move to close. I'll move to close the public hearing since there needs to be no discussion on it.
I will second the motion by Mr. Radig. Any other input by?
Did Mr. Steinke have anything to share?
I think you would ask if anybody here is to be heard.
Does anybody here have any other public input for the public hearing? Should we start our motion and second over to close? I will motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Okay. We're here to now approve the application for zoning district designation mapping amendment.
I'll move to approve.
Motion by Radig, second by Wright. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0. Conduct the first reading of the ordinance. Are you going to do that, Mr. Glazer?
Yes, sir. Woodbury County Board of, oh, no, that's the wrong ordinance, sorry. A zoning district designation mapping amendment to the Woodbury County, Iowa zoning ordinance, excuse me. Whereas the Board of Supervisors of Woodbury County, Iowa adopted a zoning ordinance on July 22nd, 2008 by Resolution 10,455 being recorded in the office of the Woodbury County Recorder, and whereas the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors has received a report in respect to amending the said ordinance from the Woodbury County Zoning Commission, which held a public hearing on the amendment, all as by law provided, which the amendment is attached hereto, marked item 1, and hereby made a part hereof, and whereas the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors has received said report, studied and considered the same, and has held hearings on said amendment, all as by law provided, and whereas the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors has concluded that the said ordinance shall amend the aforesaid zoning ordinance, now therefore be it resolved by the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors, duly assembled, that the aforesaid zoning district is amendment as shown on said attachment, item 1, and the previous zoning district designation shall be repealed upon the effective date of this amendment.
So in the future, is there a way to possibly change our zoning so that maybe a farm or ag operation that has 2 trucks or less can just stay agricultural? Because quite a few farmers have 1 or 2 trucks the way it is.
We do have a provision in our zoning ordinance to allow that as a home occupation use. But the applicant he was very transparent and open that he would have more than what would be considered a home occupation type of a usage.
How many trucks does he plan to run out of there?
I believe 5.
Okay. I mean, it seems like off the highway like that, right close to town, is not going to be anything that a neighbor would be upset about anyway, especially being most of the neighbors are ag.
Yeah, that particular point that you make was brought to light a few years ago. Around the 210th neighborhood, there was a handful of individuals that run trucks, and so that's how we amended it then. And a little bit of a different situation. What's nice about this is that, typically on a rezone or on a variance, we would typically not recommend against our own regulations, but the applicant has also signed a written affidavit stating that he would, in the event that he could acquire the minimum acres to meet the county zoning ordinance minimum requirement, he would do so. That's all I have.
Okay, so we have conducted the first reading of the ordinance?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet. Mr. Auditor, are we back on track for this action item we were talking about earlier? I wish to remove my motion to remove that amount of money from that. I want to kill my motion is what I'm saying.
So that was at what, 190?
It was 180 and
180.
84 and change.
220,000 come in for loan payment.
Okay.
We'd be up to 200.
So I have a suggestion.
Debbie, that number includes the $20,000.
I don't think so, 'cause that's cash balance, and when I talked to Dawn, she said there was one more payment coming in. I could be wrong, but I talked to Dawn.
What do you got in cash balance right now?
180,000.
How much?
180.
It's right there.
180.
So I'm going to make a new motion that it doesn't matter on either one. If we reduce that down to 100,000, whether it's right now we have 170 or 180 or 190, that would account for the two potential impending needs that are out there, and recognize that we're not trying to pull the rug out, but at the same time then look that this could be revisited in 3 weeks' time to reduce further, or it could be next year to do something further. But I think that seems to me a reasonable compromise, if you agree.
So you want to leave a balance of,
100,000 is, I mean,
Just have one question. There's a payment that's going to come in for 20,000. Where does that go? Does it go back with the 100,000 or does it go to the debt service?
I would say as long as we leave a balance of 100,000, then if it was, we're not, the motion of this intent wouldn't be to go up to 120,000. That payment would go to debt service in that case, would be my, so that we're leaving a balance of 100 either way.
That's my only question.
Mr. Chair,
yes?
I don't know why we're deciding an amount in between. Fundamentally, I'm fairly confident in the 501c3 route working, whether through us or through a community. These potentials, I'm sure they could get some help from the board in some way if they do in fact come before us. 6 to 12 months might as well be next budget year. I don't want to have any amount of money just sit without an actual use case planned out. That's part of the budget process, is planning out money, and we can't plan on a potential proposal that hasn't come to us. I think the 501c3 route will work, so I'd be in favor of eliminating this. If we just nickel and dime it down, then we're kind of counting on these proposals that may or may not materialize, and be, what if we cut to 50 as you threw out earlier, and there's a 60,000 request, and then we're figuring out where to do it from. And I just think the message is consistent if we can commit to helping with forming a 501c3, whether we use this money to do it or use gaming or help in some way. I think the barrier is very low to entry, whether we do a countywide 501c3 or, like Dennis said, ask the cities to do it themselves. So I don't see I'm optimistic about the route working, so I don't know why we would reduce a little bit instead of all of it.
So Dennis, on the debt levy, a penny is worth what, about 52,000 then at the 5 point?
Penny is 4,800,000.
So 48.
10 cents would be 408,000 or 488,000. So a penny would be 48,000.
Okay. So it's basically we're going to find about 3 cents from the debt levy over 1 year or 1.5 over 2.
With 20,000 on it, it'd be about 4 cents, a little over 4 cents. If you use all in 1 year.
I'd kind of prefer to bring this back at wrap up. I mean, I totally see your point too, Matthew.
Yeah, I'd prefer to either make an all or none decision now or at wrap up. I don't see the appeal in setting another number, since this has grown from a certain number. And
It's essentially a reserve fund within a reserve.
yeah, and that's what we're trying to get away from fundamentally. So that's my philosophical viewpoint on it. Is either make a decision now or at the end of the budget process.
Did you make that motion, Mr. Taylor?
I think I made that suggestion and didn't,
I'm asking, I don't remember.
yeah. I don't think I formally moved it.
Technically,
Or did I?
it's a small group and it's informal, and you did make a motion, but nobody seconded it, and so it really has died for a lack of second because you moved on to further discussion.
Okay. Do we have a second?
For what motion?
I think he withdrew, you withdrew your.
I withdrew my motion.
Have you killed your own motion yet, Mr. Taylor?
So my motion was to reserve down to 100,000, and if I hear crickets, then
It's dying for lack of a second.
That's correct. That's
And-
where we are at this point.
Then I'm not hearing a second.
I don't know if anyone else is opposed to bringing it back at wrap-up. I think I'd kind of like to see that.
Can I declare that the motion died for lack of a second, Mr. Gill? And we will move on and discuss it at a later date.
and that'll give some time to maybe find out who's where, if that is a material thing to the, or how to set up some of those 501c3s if that's something, if that works.
Pretty sure if this makes the city paper tomorrow, I'll get a lot of feedback. One way or the other.
Well, then we know people are listening. Then we know people are listening. Okay.
As long as the story is Woodbury County Board willing to loan as a pass-through up to $10 million per year on ambulances, then it won't look so bad.
Although if they buy 10 million in ambulances, they still got to pay them back.
They do, Mr. Raddick. There is some responsibility attached to loans still.
Item C, discussion on impending deployment for Mr. Taylor.
And thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I am facing an impending combat deployment to the Middle East, something I made clear before accepting the Republican nomination and ensured was widely publicized throughout my campaign. I appreciate the support of the community that elected me to this board nonetheless, and assured this community that I'd received a written opinion from legal counsel of the Secretary of State's office that an overseas military deployment would not create a vacancy, something Iowa Code is clear on. And that opinion has the support in writing as well from Woodbury County Attorney's Office, and likewise affirmed by opinion within our JAG. And so with that, my last meeting before being on orders will be January 19th. I'm not able to actively participate in exercise of the office. However, to the extent that I can, I will seek to remain as informed as possible. And so as a chaplain in Iowa Army National Guard, I'll serve in that capacity during deployment. And so the code sections are 69.20, a temporary vacancy due to military service, and Iowa Code Section 69.3. The remaining members of the board may appoint a temporary person to fulfill the duties of the vacancy. Whether they choose to do so or not upon return from a deployment, the board's obligated to immediately reinstate the position. And while the board may appoint someone on or after January 21st, which will be the first date of active duty orders, I'll share recommendations for what I hope to see in terms of those who the board may support on the January 19th meeting. But this is an informational item, and I appreciate it very much.
I'll move to receive the information.
What's in the agenda?
It's in the agenda. We don't move to receive it. What time frame do you know? Can you tell us right now? Did that change from the campaign till now? Is there any defined minimum, maximum amount of time that you'll be gone?
Yeah, so the orders are an authorization of up to 400 days. My anticipation right now is potentially between 10 to 12 months, but the situation and an environment that we're going into is fluid in terms of some of those dynamics. So
I'm just going to go out on a limb. I'm going to bet the military will send him back. They probably aren't going to keep him any longer than they have to. With all due respect.
yeah, thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other comments for our in-house chaplain?
You know, personally, I don't know that we necessarily need to fill it, especially immediately. I think it's possibly something we could play by ear and see, you know, if we go 2 to 3 months as a 4-member board, do we want to fill it then? You know, I kind of prefer to take that route rather than just fill a temporary vacancy right away. So that's.
And just so you know, my understanding and consultation is that that's a discussion and a decision that I'm not a part of. And it's the remaining members, so.
Correct.
All right, glad to hear what you don't think.
Wise answer from council at the end of the desk.
I'm still awake.
All right, we are going to take a 9-minute recess, and we'll return at 5:15.
Maybe it feels like I'm picking on you there, so.
I'm used to it.
What can't you hear? What'd you say?
I can't hear anything. The acoustics in here stink.
First I've ever heard that.
What do you see when I lock my screen? Do you still see anything?
I see,
That's my screensaver.
that's your screensaver, and then I can see Justin, at least partially. Oh, good.
You probably, you're all over.
Justin on and Matthew on, and
All right.
I don't see any other computers up there. I know Rocky's is upstairs.
They can get on their phone maybe, but I wouldn't know anything about it. But yeah, they're not even trying by now. Sometimes.
You guys are right next to each other, and one of them couldn't switch spots, and, you know.
It's gonna spread. I'm not recording this, you know, how I said I but I don't know if you were watching. I did stop sharing my screen for a second because it was telling me to email, so I
Right.
tried to, and I don't know if I shared it right.
Yeah.
The red bar around it means you're sharing it, right?
Yeah.
I don't know, it's kind of fun, something different.
It makes it easier for them for sure. It's just, you know, they just have to take the steps to accomplish it.
I like your mask, I just like looked at it. I mean, like you wear it and you don't see what it is until you
Right, yeah.
pay attention for a second.
Unfortunately, it's new and it's too small and it's killing my ears right now.
You need to get those ones that have a little
Yeah,
things that you can adjust them. What's she got going on over there? I can open up the agenda.
That other thing though was popping up. Now it's like a call-in system. David Weiser guy called in and we were having a hard time with it.
Going along. All right, thank you.
So tomorrow I can just email some of the stuff that I've already gathered and for Josh, who said he's working from home. Woodman, for that committee. I figured you're the person from the
I don't
others.
know, ask Pat.
Okay, I'll ask Pat.
I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know if Rocky appoints them, and that might want to go hands-on, who knows?
that's true.
Because he's been involved with it before.
Yeah, so you might have some inside knowledge about what affects what.
When are you thinking of the first meeting?
I'd like to do it early next week. Yeah. Do stupid colonoscopy on Friday. So I've taken Thursday off too. Well, I think I kind of overguard me. I know, and I don't actually. I don't start taking that stuff till the afternoon. But, you know, my medicine doesn't do good on it.
Anyone like the Congress has got? Oh my. Be careful who's sitting beside him.
Well, use one hand right now. Okay, we're there. We are missing one. Reports on committee meetings. Mr. Young? Mr. Radig?
I've had some committee meetings, but nothing to report.
Okay. Taylor?
Just that we're going to have a meeting, I believe, on the morgue.
Yeah, that's next Monday.
Yep. So,
Mr. Wright, anything? I also have a meeting at Rolling Hills on this coming Friday. More on that later. Round 2 of citizen concerns. Hearing none. Or, oh, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Kevin Green, Director of Sun District Health Department. Just wanted to give you a brief update on the COVID-19 with the vaccine. One of the things is that the report, according to yesterday, indicates that Woodbury County residents have received about 3,500 doses. It doesn't seem a lot, but this includes the long-term care facilities, also along with what we've done with the healthcare professionals. We are still classified in Tier 1A, which is the healthcare professionals. We've been actively working with those. The hospitals did the initial clinics. We have scheduled for Thursday and Friday. And within that healthcare professionals, we also included our EMS providers because we felt those are the ones that were going into the homes, transporting, in the ambulances and that sort of stuff. And it was probably crucial we keep them up and viable. At this point in time, as far as the vaccine, we were notified on Friday that they're directing the majority of it that's coming into Iowa into the long-term care facilities for their residents and staff. We're estimating, as I think it was reported, is about 19,000 doses coming into the state in a week, and then those are reallocated out according to population. We are not in the throes of moving into the 1B yet. We have to get 1A covered. We're hoping to have that done by the 1st of February, which is kind of the indication we've gotten. When we move into 1B, what we're able and who we're able to serve will be completely dependent upon the volume and the amount of vaccine that we can get allocated to us in Woodbury County. And so that'll kind of be determinate because it doesn't make any sense to look at an audience of, 200 people if you've got 25 doses. And so we're going to try and figure out what that strategy, the approach will be, and how we can get that met in the 1B. We will continue providing clinics in that area within the 1B, then into the 1C. Those clinics will take a look at, and one of the things is we will be obligated once we're in 1B, is their guidance today came out that says 50% of that vaccine we receive in the county has to be designated for those for the age population. So they're currently looking at the 75 and older. What we want to just kind of emphasize, and if any of the public is listening, don't call anywhere for appointments. Nobody's giving appointments. We don't have appointments for the general public. We just need to kind of people hold tight. We'll be sending out over social media and also our healthcare providers. We'll be contacting those when they're eligible and ready to distribute the vaccine. But I did want to give you a point, and then today's actually I did get a clarification. If you do read the Infectious Disease Advisory Council report, it does have a caveat in there that the interim director of public health did add in governmental officials. So I quickly called because I needed to know what that meant because the question will be coming to us. That is really directed at those that are operating in the state capitol. It's not the local government officials, the courthouses and that type of stuff. They have to go according to the tier groups as we hit those in the populations. So I did want to just be here briefly to kind of give you that update, any questions that you've got related to that, and just respond to those.
Can I ask a question?
So you did send an email
Yes.
about potentially having a sign up for COVID vaccine and how that would work. And I think, the Sheriff's Department would probably be the first group in our.
We're actually within that 1B, there ends up, it's all over the board. There is law enforcement, there's fire, there are those involved with the meat processing and packaging plants. It's a very broad category is what it was, but yes, that's.
So are we going to have somebody from Chad's department compile a list of people that want the vaccine for you and
What I
get
just
that to
asked for,
you?
yes, to kind of get an idea if you know total number of employees, and we also recognize certain ones are not interested in receiving it. So in our planning efforts, what we just like to know is sort of a ballpark number. We've had anywhere from a 75 to 80% acceptance rate for those it's been offered to in most of the facilities. So it's just knowing for the planning so that when we have doses, we know about how many out of that department. How the process will work then is if it's a clinic that we're operating, they'll get an online appointment scheduler and they complete the information on that, and then we'll do what we call closed pod clinics. Any other questions?
Mr. Gill.
I'm kind of confused with what you just said about the age and 75 plus because of what was reported today. So, because they were talking about 65 plus some underlying conditions.
Right. What the status is in the state of Iowa is this Infectious Disease Advisory Council actually was operating last week and this week. So they came out with the 75 and older, and then they'd also look at underlying health conditions. Today, the Department of Health and Human Services at the federal level made the announcement that they are contemplating looking at just opening it up to 65 and older. So right now, the Iowa guidance that we have to follow is a 75. But if it becomes to, basically, as we get vaccine, if it becomes available, there is a potential it could be lowered to 75. or 65, excuse me, is what it would be. So that's the continuous pace we play is what happens at the local, what the state says is going to occur, and what happens at the federal and the guidance they give. And so we kind of get caught in between. But that's right now, our guidance that was released just this afternoon said the 75 and older.
So would the jailers and then, say, juvenile detention also be in that 1B group as well?
Yes, corrections is actually sort of a separate caveat even from law enforcement is what it was, and that's kind of what we're looking at going down through the populations that, we may even ask, that within those, and there could be something too as we do some of the public, I've kind of expressed it to staff as what I call open arms. One of the things with the vaccine is it has to be thawed. It's either ultra-frozen or frozen. Once it's thawed, you have 5 days to use it. Once you pop the first dose out of it, you've got 6 hours to administer all doses in that vial. Otherwise, it goes to waste. And so if we see that the need and kind of it becomes what the demand is, that what we would do is we may actually contact some entities to say, would you have staff available that if we find out we're getting to the end of a clinic and we have doses out of a vial left we need to get administered, how long would it take you to get X number of people up here? And that may be one way we start moving into some of that population in the east too. But that's just one of those that we'll look, and if we do that, we're going to attempt to get it into those other priority populations.
Well, you certainly don't want to waste any doses. That makes national news media.
Yes. Yes, we know. I talked to one county today that they were working in a long-term care facility, and what ended up happening was the personnel in there thawed all the vaccine, 100 doses, and realized they only needed 60. So they were scrambling between now and within 5 days to get those other 40 doses out there. And the real ramification that ends up being is, as soon as somebody outside of the priority gets one of these spare doses, the first thing that they do is they post themselves with a picture and their vaccine card on social media, and that just creates a firestorm. Everybody's wanting to know why and what, and I've talked with staff that if we do this, we're going to give directions that say if you choose to post this, indicate the reason you received it is you were the recipient of an extra dose that would have otherwise gone to waste, just to attempt to avoid that. But there's no way to cleanly do it, but that's one of the things we consistently do with. And we have local residents watch, we get it reported to us, but there's nothing we can do because they're outside of our county. So it's just an interesting time. But right now, we're looking at those healthcare professionals, and we'll be sending out information when we move to the next audience level.
So was there any testing of people that, before they received the vaccine, to check to see if they had at one point contracted COVID-19 beforehand?
No, there's no requirement as far as, you can still receive the vaccine even if you've had it. Right now, they're talking about when you recover, they look at a 90-day window, as far as you don't have to quarantine if you are a close contact, but they are still recommending even those individuals that have had it to go ahead and get the vaccine for additional protection.
How about those who have the antigens, if that's the right term, or have some sort of immunity? Is there any testing that?
You can, I guess the most common one that I recommend is if you go in to donate blood. That is one of the places that they're doing that with all individuals that come in for donors. It's the least expensive, but it's also beneficial for the donation of the blood, and then they'll draw that out if you do have the antigens or antibodies.
So is there any contemplation of that in terms of you already have that, so you don't need the vaccine? Or is that not a thing?
No, because what we don't know is we don't know the longevity and protective nature of that.
Okay.
Too. They haven't really, it's been so new and recent, they don't know for sure. Exactly. So they're still looking at still getting the vaccine.
Okay.
And the other part that may change from the federal level is currently, that we don't know how they're going to do this, currently the federal assets, they have reserved 50% of the doses so we can get the booster doses completed. They were talking about changing that and then just distributing all. If that begins to occur, we're not quite sure how to do that because we need to make sure, because you can't switch types of vaccine. If you get Moderna the first time, your second dose has to be Moderna, same way with Pfizer. And so we're kind of looking at that. Right now, we're assured there's a primary dose and a booster dose, all in the allocation. They follow one another at the appropriate time period. If they release all of that for general use, then we're going to try and figure out, we got to strategize to make sure that we're getting that. But I'm hoping that doesn't happen until the manufacturing system is stable enough that they consistently know what they're going to produce on a regular basis.
Is it the same compound for both doses?
Basically.
Assuming you get Pfizer for the first one, you get Pfizer for the second one, it's the same thing?
Yep.
Going in your arm? Okay.
Is there anything different in the science between the two?
In the science?
Yeah.
There is slight basics in the production of it, and that's the reason why it requires the ultra-frozen and the frozen. As far as all the details, it's technical to explain, I guess, is what it would be.
Do you prefer
Tyler
one?
would be better doing it. What's that?
Do you prefer one over the other?
I have no preference at all.
Okay.
On that. I'm just waiting as the extra arm. If we have extra doses, and that's when I'll be able to get the vaccine. I'm even in Tier B in our own organization, so that's where it falls. So, anyway, I just wanted to give that quick update, share that information with you, and won't take any more time. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess then Melissa would have to probably follow up with juvenile detention employees or anybody that.
Yeah, we've talked.
Okay.
Sort of. When we get down to doing those, I'll be working with most of the departments.
Okay.
Get that appointment scheduled. It's a link, they go in, and it's all electronically done.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other citizen concerns? Board concerns? Sirs?
Yeah, I did have a couple other, on the secondary roads, Mark is gone, is he? Okay. He had a follow-up to the meeting discussion last week, and let's see if I can find that now here. Okay. What about you had sent an email on an issue regarding $600 that, we can't respond to. Is there something public we can discuss?
Talking with Kenny on that, I think we can find some funds for that.
Okay, sorry, I'm trying to find
Sounds like it'll be more than $600, but we're working on a solution.
All right, so the cushion or whatever in the secondary roads budget would be down to about $3,405 is what he had said. That seems like a small cushion to me. We may have to look at maybe redirecting some money back towards that if we can find cuts somewhere else, in my opinion. So I just want to throw that out there as a board concern.
Anybody else? All right. Regular meeting business meeting is over. Now we're into the budget review. Item 1, number 18, I'm sorry. County Library, pages 2 to 6.
There's a tab for the county library about 3/4 of the way through the book. Excuse me. 2 pages to look at basically, and this is a board that sets the actual budget out there. They have their own budget hearing. And what they do is they take the towns that participate, I take the population that participate in towns and the townships, get it per capita, take it times that, and then it comes out to each city share and the township share. The only thing we allocate is a township share of $168,391. Page 3 shows how it's dispersed, separate out to the towns. Towns can vote to get out. So far, these have all stayed. Then when you get to page 6, that is, page 6, that shows the allocation there. We're going from $163,216 up to $168,391. Basically, all we're doing is accepting that, levy against the townships, and then the townships, the library will get the shares as it comes in through taxation. So basically, there's really not a whole lot we do. We just receive it, accept it.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Duet, second by Radig. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0.
Okay, now we go to the county attorney,
County attorneys.
page 15, and that's our jury and witness fees. And then the other 2 are non-tax ones. We can explain those. If the county attorney wants to address the jury and witness fees. They did not ask for an increase.
No, we kept everything
Can
as
we ask
is.
for an increase?
Not this year.
Not for this line item, the next hearing.
If you look back 2 years in 1920, they're almost on target there. This year, Currently, we're probably close to 16,000, so they're right on target. And again, I can verify this, this is a hard budget because you don't know how many grand juries you're gonna have, witness fees, interpreting fees, you don't know.
And we haven't had court. So, I mean, basically this whole year, we haven't had a whole lot of court.
It's about to open back up though, February 1st. So it'll be hard back at it. But as far as witness fees, I just want to, I think this is a good opportunity for Mark to tell you guys about one of the witnesses that we just brought in, our expert witness for one of our cases. And I think that's really more of the sign of the times, that it's going to increase. But I'd just like for him to just spend just briefly on what we just did.
Yeah, we had a case recently where we had to bring in a forensic psychologist. And we would expect that just in this one case, that we're probably going to be looking at expert witness fees in the neighborhood of $10,000 to $15,000 in this case. The risk is that we don't know when these cases come up where we're going to need to spend this type of money. We don't have anybody locally who's qualified to do the work, although there's some local people who do claim that they do, but realistically, they don't have the qualifications. So we do have to go to people who are not inexpensive. But this is part of the necessary process that we have to go through in prosecuting the cases, and that's to use qualified witnesses when we have to. And so I'm just trying to give you a heads up that if these cases pop up, witness fees could be significant, and it's something that we can't anticipate or control very well.
Okay. Any other earth-shaking stuff on this one?
Shouldn't be.
I'll move to receive.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt to receive. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0.
Next one's forfeiture on 1617. In this case here, on these non-tax, we usually budget what's in the fund currently. They may get more revenue down the road, but these are non-tax funds and use at the discretion of the county attorney.
The one thing I will point out, which doesn't really affect you guys with forfeitures, but the laws have changed surrounding forfeitures as to when we can actually seek to take those funds away from the defendant. We need convictions now. We just can't take it once we make an arrest like we used to in the past. So they're going to be a little bit more probably sporadic. And then there's just going to be some cases where we flat just cannot take the money because there's limits, and I think it's like a $5,000 limit over and under conviction, that kind of thing. So those numbers may change in the future, but.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0. County fine collections.
That's a non-tax fund again. It's created through collections by the county attorney's office, I believe, and fines. And again, this is at the discretion of the county attorney. The 97,000 is funds on hand. There's more funds usually come in, but that'll be addressed when they come in, amend the budget, if they spend it all.
So do we have anything in here, or it's just a zero?
It's his discretion.
97,000.
No, I understand that, but what's that?
There's 97,000 budgeted
That's
on page 19.
Okay.
Page 19.
I'll move to receive.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
We now go to conservation tab. About 3/4 of the way through. These are all alphabetical too. And the three funds we're going to talk about today are all non-tax funds, no taxes involved. So we'll go through each individual one. Dan's here to answer any questions on any of those funds, but basically it's up to the Conservation Board how this money is spent. So we'll start with the Nature Center, page 20 through 23. And again, he's plugging in budgeted amounts for these, but it's their, it doesn't involve taxes. So if you go to page 20, that shows his expenditures he's planning on doing. Again, this is set by the Conservation Board and the directors. So it's really just a formal receive and view it, see how he's spending it. And that's it.
Well, this isn't necessarily expenditure here, this is the, oh yeah, summer expenditures in summer.
Yeah, that's their expenses by line, which is shown on the pages here on page 20.
Yeah.
The activity on this is blank because this would be the activity for fiscal year 22. If I do look at past budgets, if you would want me to, then you can see the activity on those years.
On that page, you're actually seeing the revenues he's projecting, also the expenses. The revenues are the short numbers on the left, expenses are the long numbers.
Is 100,000 in the donations?
We get donations, grants, and then through our foundation, they have their fundraisers for supporting development education in the nature center. So it's a good history over the past how many years. That's what it takes.
Yeah.
We've tried to streamline that. We put all that over to the what we call the 057 account, and sometimes that was mixed with our CIP in the 067. So I wanted to break it out so I had all those grant dollars and all the expenditures were in one fund that was the nature center only. It wasn't mixed with our CIP funds because I didn't want to be, it's always kind of hard to pull those figures out. This way I can track a lot easier. So working with Michelle and Dennis, we moved all that nature center over to the 057 for the next fiscal year so we can start tracking everything a lot closer.
So what does this mean going from 25 to 100,000, that you're anticipating more?
I'm having a hard time reading that. I've got new contacts. They're supposed to be, takes a week to, where you at? A donation?
Yes.
For your budget. That would be donations that we're expecting to cover that account that we pulled in from 067. And those might have been spread out before, and the total is 100,000 now.
Okay. So you reduce the number of line items, basically?
The line item expenditures are budgeted at the same number, 21,559. On page 23.
So does that 100,000 just not matter, since if you don't hit it, you get whatever you get? Okay.
Yeah, we can only spend what we get in.
Right. So it's just, okay.
Number to throw in there, yes. So he has an idea possibly, but if he doesn't get it, he can't have it.
How many staff actively look for those funds?
How many staff actively? Myself,
Look for those funds.
Grants.
How many look for those funds?
myself,
Okay.
the EE director, Dawn Schneider, is very good at it. I don't know if you've met Dawn, but that's all she does, is works with organizations and working with the community organizations and grants. So
I will move to receive.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Are we just on the first division of this?
Yeah, Nature Center.
Okay, all right, I'll ask a question coming up.
We good?
Yep.
Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next one's REAP, non-tax. He gets a per capita distribution. He has estimates on page 18 of the revenue. On page 19 is where he wants to spend the money. You have to realize he has carryover balances. So he's anticipating 93,400 carryover to fund the expenses he has projected. So it's revenue plus carryover, and that equals his expenses. No tax dollars involved in this fund.
These revenues come from the state legislature through the gambling fund, the REAP. I don't know if you've heard of REAP, Resource Enhancement and Protection. We get $24,000 for our per county allocation and $7,000 per capita. It's a formula. So bigger counties, fortunately for us, get more money. The smaller counties get less on the per capita. But that's something we put in there, and there's certain things we can spend it on, and we try and build it up so we can get enough to do something with.
Chair.
Sir.
On land acquisition, on page 19, does that show how much money we've spent over the last 2.5 years on land, or that's just what's budgeted, or?
That was budgeted in case we were to purchase ground, because then we also have to pay for it, and then we don't use tax dollars to buy ground.
Use REAP funds?
We use REAP, Wildlife Habitat Stamp funds. We work with the National Turkey Federation, Whitetails Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, State Pheasants Forever Council, and we go out and raise those funds to pay for that if we're going after property.
Do you know how much property we have approximately?
When I got here 3 years ago, we were sitting on about 5,500 acres,
Okay.
close to 5,500 now.
And do you know how that compares with other counties? Are we way behind, or are we on par? Not that we have to keep up with the other Joneses, but.
Well, I'd like to be the leaders, but.
All right, I'm sure you would, but.
But no, we're about average.
Okay.
For a county our size. You look at the top 6 counties, and you start looking at some of the other counties that have more ground, but like Polk County, of course, another world. But we're doing pretty good. But when you look at the amount of, on that ground, how much of it is wildlife habitat where you bring hunters in? If you look at the economic gain, they say $400 per hunter is what we see in the economy when they come in to hunt, every time they come to our county. So I know it's kind of hard to wrap your hands around that figure, where it comes from, but if they come in here to hunt, fish, camp, there's dollars tied to them. And if you don't have those areas for them to recreate, we don't get that economic, that economic bang for the buck.
Appreciate it.
They won't be buying any ammo here, though.
That's tough.
Any other questions? I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. Last chance. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. That's 5-0. Conservation Reserve.
This one's controlled by the Conservation Board and Conservation Director. This is money that comes in from years ago. The board decided, instead of putting all the camping fees, kind of revenues from the parks, instead of general basic, they decided to put in Conservation Reserve. I think that's established by law.
Yeah, the 1981 finance law allowed you, the supervisors back then, to make that resolution to allow those funds to be put in there towards capital improvements. And that's all that money is spent for, is capital improvements, and if they need to help with land acquisition.
What is 84900, the last item, miscellaneous? Looked like it was 41,000 some odd in fiscal year 20, and then $308 in 21, and there's no activity through June, and
Those are expenditures this is revenues?
Yeah. Sometimes they get funds back. We don't have a particular line item put in. It could have been a grant coming back in.
We've received, when you get a $200,000 grant, like we did for the Fleming property, which might be where that came in, you have to bring it into your budget as revenue, but you also have to expend it. So that makes, so sometimes we'll budget a higher amount there knowing if we're working on land acquisition coming up. Because you have to have the spending authority to do it, or I have to amend my budget. So if I don't have anything budgeted there for land acquisition item, then we have to come in and get our budget amended to expend.
So grants can come in to this division that are unanticipated, and if you don't have, let's say $10,000 that's programmed here, that won't.
I didn't have the sheet from Dennis, so my pages don't match yours.
Okay.
But, so when we budget, when we go look at land acquisition, here it was, we had Gilchrist, Murd, and railroad grants, that was $100,000 that we got in that year. You got $100,000 from Murd, I had $50,000 from Gilchrist, $15,000 from the Union Pacific Railroad, and that's where the revenues come from.
So that's something you can't have anticipated before.
No.
And then you're doing this line item as a catch-all for miscellaneous, because who knows what you otherwise would have. Am I tracking you?
Yeah, it is. We
Okay.
don't know what, we have a landowner come in and say, hey, I have 40 acres next to the Oak Ridge complex. We'd like to sell you. We want to do it this month before the end of the year.
Okay.
And it happens. They want to do it for tax purposes. If we don't have money budgeted as an expenditure line item, we can't, it's kind of hard for us to do.
Right.
We do work with the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation to help carry that until we get the grants, but sometimes we have to step up.
I guess the thing I'm confused on, Dan, is, and I'm not questioning, I just, like on that miscellaneous, it looks like it's been zeroed out. Looked like there was 10,000, unless I'm reading this wrong.
I'm looking for the miscellaneous. Right here.
Looked like it was 10,000, and they're taking 10,000 out, and there's zero. If you have to have money budgeted, and
Right. Well, it appears if the donation, some donation will include miscellaneous, you move that 10,000, add it up to that 75, but also increase it to 100,000. So it's actually increased between the two $15,000, between those two line items.
I see what he's talking about.
Right. And you just combine these into one.
We did, and that was some of the work we were doing when we were looking at trying to get rid of line items.
so that miscellaneous can essentially be deleted. I'm not trying to make an issue out of something that's not. What's that?
Budget's zero this year.
Right, right. So if, okay.
Yeah, down the road it'll be deleted, but as long as there's an expenditure or a budget there, we have to include it in the comparables.
Okay.
Until we get past where it's all zeros going across, then we can delete them.
Okay. I think it makes sense now that you have that you're pointing to the donations part. I was just confused. Thank you.
And this is an example. I had a gentleman call me. Well, it was December 23rd. Said, hey, I'd like to make a donation for tax purposes, and I saw your flyer in the mail or on the website. And I thought he was talking about a flyer that the Iowa Natural Heritage Foundation sent out. So I gave him that spiel, and he goes, no, I've seen that one, but I want to know about the one about the Woodbury County Conservation Foundation. He made a $5,000 donation we didn't expect, got the check the next day, made another $1,000 donation to conservate the environmental ed fund. So those are kind of hard to.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, we looked at the revenues on page 25 and page 27, shows the two budgets he does have for that fund. One's in nature center and one's in disease. Probably if you want to ask any questions here.
We do try to do all of our own capital improvements, other than when we didn't have the money to do the HVAC system. That was a big hit. When we're doing CIP, our restrooms and showers, what's going down at Browns Lake right now, the phase 2 of the beach and the shoreline and the fishing pier. we try to pay for that's all through CIP funds that we use through user fees. So we budget out, we meet once a year as long-range planning and try and prioritize our projects and what we're gonna try and fund the next year and what we have the money for. This spring, we had to cancel and back off doing the beach and the concession because of COVID. We took over $100,000 hit in revenue from loss, from having campgrounds and cabins closed. So we had to push that project back. I hope to come talk to you about that later, but a way we can fund that and use our CIP funds to pay for it. But that's what we try and do is we don't like to come to you and ask for money to build cabins or shower houses. We like to use the funds, generate those funds, put them back into the park. So that's what what's nice about this fund, the way it's set up. We don't have to come to you and ask for money. In that regard, anyway.
I'd move to receive.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Radig. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you. I'm always available if you have any questions, and I'd like to sit down with you sometime, Justin, and get to know you a little bit more and let you know what we do. And some of these guys already, we've been through the ringer a couple times, but, so if you have any questions, give me a shout. So, all right, thanks.
He's the guy I told you about.
No, 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 sorry.
If you go further, deeper into your tabs, Human Services. I don't think anybody's here for Human Services. Basically, they're asking for the same dollar amount as the current year. Also, on page 1, you'll see where we get a reimbursement. Again, that's gonna be around $315,000. That'll be the same, so we didn't lose any there because of coronavirus. And then on page 2, just shows their expenditures. They're just asking for exactly what they asked for this current year, $125,800. Now, a lot of their expenditures toward the end of the year, and usually they spend every night of it.
I'll go ahead and move to receive.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay.
Okay, now you go clear to the front under Auditor tab. And the first one's, we're going to do 3 different types of elections here. The first one is general elections on page 1718. These are costs that are spread countywide as a tax. They aren't reimbursable costs. Steve is here to add anything if you have any questions there. Or Pat. Either one. And this election will take place June of 22. So hopefully COVID will be over by then, who knows?
Page you.
Kind of difficult estimating a budget for general election, primary election anymore, because who knows how many you're gonna have vote. Last time in general, they had a tremendous amount of voters. Who knows what the primary will be.
Do you look back then just a couple of years ago to see basically similar type elections? Is that?
Yeah,
the
I
best?
basically tried to run it off of the same thing, the same primary election from 2 years ago, or what we had just been through.
And do you know what that was about in comparison to this? Is it?
The actual in 2019-2020 budget came through at 36,442. And so that's why I budgeted right at 36,360 for the same election.
I must be off on what I'm looking at.
General primary election.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking at.
Am I on the wrong page?
I'm not seeing it either.
Here's what we have for budget. 42,000 compared to. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one? Yeah.
You have 8001. In fiscal year 20, there was 82,034 expended.
Where are we at, Michelle? I'm sorry, I'm lost a little bit.
Page 17.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, I was off on the wrong one.
Code and not in your book. We asked about what the expenses were for 2 years ago. That's not going to be in your book. Prior fiscal year.
Okay.
Yeah, okay, good. I was just on the wrong page, sorry.
There's a,
The budget that I'm putting up here is from fiscal year 20 of the budget that's actually from that.
So you're saying this year, 82,000, and the last election that was similar, was about 75, is that, am I hearing y'all right?
75 was the budget, 82 was expended.
From the prior election to a couple years ago? That's similar to this. Am I tracking you, Steve? Or not?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, so this year's budget in comparison to 2 years ago in a similar election, those are the two comparisons we're looking at up there? Okay, perfect, thank you.
It actually shows in your budget book here.
What's that?
It shows in your budget book on 17, the new year coming up, you go back to 19, 20 is 114,000. I'm not sure where that number's coming from. All I know is, hang on a sec.
if you look on page 17, the budget, the proposed budget is 142,000. There's a difference of about 28,000, and that because of the one that we just completed was 115,000. And the difference is that we ran that with only 5 polling places. We were only going to do 2 to begin with. This is anticipation of opening every polling place because we are required to by law. It was because of the emergency proclamation that we were able to reduce the number of polling places in the primary of June of this year.
Pretty much at the mercy of demand. We have to fund elections. This is his best estimate he can do. You know, whoever anticipated a general election like we just had,
Right.
I mean, it's incredible. So that's his best estimate. Could be high, could be low, but you gotta make sure you have enough in there.
Do you anticipate postage and mailing being as high?
I do. It's hard. It's a crapshoot. You don't know. Postage is always one. It's a expense that's been increasing in every election, and we anticipate that it's going to be the same way. You don't know how voters are going to react to the polling place, what's going to take place.
In other words, now that.
Pardon?
In other words, now that you can vote by mail so conveniently,
We,
it may continue to be.
that has been the, what has happened in the past is the more that, this is one of those things that are going to be as a result of COVID is that more people are doing it and more people are going to be comfortable with it. It just depends on how they're going to feel at that period of time. We have no idea what is going to happen.
There's no offset if we pay more on postage, something else goes down though, is there? I mean, you still got your...
It had been in the past. I can't tell you that now. I can't guarantee you now. Because what we had done is because we were able to use, in different elections, we would use vote centers and that type of thing, and so that we would reduce the number of expenses in polling places, but the postage would go up. So we don't know what's going to happen in the future. we cannot use vote centers in the primary election or the general election. We were able to do it just because of the emergency directive this year. So what I'm saying is that the polling place's expense is going to go up, and the postage probably will not go down because of people's acceptance of vote by mail.
Further comments? Questions? I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion made DeWitt, second by Radig. Anyone? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion carries.
Page 21 is your school, the city elections, those are combined now. We estimate 75% reimbursement on this. This is somewhat reimbursable. That's kind of, could be lower, could be a little higher. But they explain if you have any questions on school elections, the city combined.
That's 75% reimbursed.
75%.
Or is it 50%? What was it?
What's that?
75% reimbursed, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we budgeted that. There's revenue coming back.
Yeah.
Could be high, could be low.
Okay.
The revenues are on page 13, past revenue.
This one's very similar to the one from 2019-20, because that was pre-COVID, so everything was pretty normal in that one, so we budgeted basically the same.
The city and school elections have been combined. Last year was first year, see, am I right, last year? Okay. Last year was the first year that they were combined. They actually ended up saving a little bit of money, but they're all, now it's just one election. City and school were combined before. The way that they did it makes it very difficult to use vote centers. We weren't able to use vote centers in that election. And that, as I said before, that was one where we did save some money. We were offset it with postage with using vote centers. But vote centers now have been very difficult to use because of jurisdictional issues. The city boundaries don't match up with the city school primaries and that sort of thing. So that's, it kind of is what it is from what we budgeted from the last election, just the expenses that were there. That's pretty much all we have to go on.
What kind of work do the temps do?
Doing absentee voting. We have a staff that comes in, we have our staff, and then for the absentee, that's where we need to bring in temporary people to deal with those, to keep up with the pace.
This isn't really a budget question, Pat, but have you seen increased participation in the school board elections combining? Has that seen an increase in school board elections combining? Do you know what that, is that?
The last one did, but it really is a function. It's hard to tell about turnout. It's based on who's running, what positions are open, that sort of thing. But one of the things that made it difficult is the next one you're going to consider. I'll wait till we get into the city primary to talk about that. But yeah, it just depends on what it's going to be like. And like I said, it's kind of a crapshoot. All we can do is go off of what our experience was in the last election. That was the first one.
Move to receive.
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0. City primary.
Page 23, again, we budget 75% reimbursed revenues on this. That could be high or low, we don't know. But they're budgeting basically pretty much the same as they budgeted 2 years ago.
One of the things that occurred here at the city primary elections is that, once again, in city elections, we were able to use vote centers, but now that they combined them, we didn't use vote centers in the city primary because we get to that issue where we confuse voters as far as where they need to go. Because the city primary, we had set up for quite a while where we were using vote centers. In Sioux City, people were, they understood where they could go, and they could go to any one of those places. We reduced polling places from 28 to 13, and it was a saving, especially for the city primary. But now, with postage and that sort of thing, it's going to be something we'll consider again this year, depending on, what kind of activity is and that sort of thing. But it's going to be based on what we look at as far as turnout, who's running, that sort of thing, too, in the city primary. And this is just for the city of Sioux City. The city of Sioux City is the only one that has a primary. Sometime, one year recently, we didn't even have a primary, and that was the first time it occurred in 24 years that I've been here. So we never know what's going to take place. But we are reimbursed at 75% too, is what we budgeted for that.
Well, from what I hear, we'll be expecting primaries.
Pardon?
From what I hear, they're expecting primaries.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment.
I will move to receive.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Building services.
Okay, building services.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
First one will be page 18, Hampton Courthouse. These are relatively small budgets, so we try to get these out of the way before we get the big ones. So we start with Hampton, page 18. Not a very big budget.
Kenny Schmidt's Building Services. We've got approximately 8 buildings. We've got 4 tonight, which are all, again, small: Anthem, Hills, Siouxland District Health, and Triview. Out of those 4, they make up only about, I say only, but it's about $37,000 out of the entire budget. Of the 8 buildings, I think our financial wizard can help us with this maybe, but I think I've reduced over all 8 buildings about 1% of the budget from last year. So I'd answer any questions you have on these 4 buildings. They're pretty small, and the budgets are pretty tight on these buildings. So.
Any chance we could get that Anthem Courthouse to be like a National Register of Historic Places?
Think?
Probably not, huh? There's a lot more grants for those kind of buildings.
If we keep it open long enough, maybe.
That's right. I'll move to receive F1.
Second.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Further discussion, questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0.
Next one's Prairie Hills, page 19 and 20.
What are we paying on for electricity and power there? That's the shuttered
Training
building?
center.
Yeah.
Or the training center?
So to answer your question more clearly, the building services throughout the past, I don't know how many years since I've worked for the county, has budgeted for the electricity and the water, whatever that usage is, other supplies, but the sheriff's department has budgeted for the gas for that facility. And so we've continued to do that. If that's something the board would like to change at some point, we certainly can do that, but that's just the way it's been done in the past, and we continue to do it that way.
We're talking about the old county home.
And I'm also talking about the new training center.
Are they all on 1 meter? Are they all in this line item?
Yes.
Okay.
What's under the professional services at that location?
Professional services would be things like fire extinguisher inspections and snow removal.
It doesn't show up there, but in your budget book, he has it all broke down by line item. He does a very good job of that.
We put a blade on the RV that's out there, and I'm kidding.
Actually, you brought up the question. So under professional services, the largest amount underneath that is snow removal. We continue to do snow removal there. We hire that done. It's a large area to do. And the company that does it for us usually, it's basically on demand. So we have things like some emergency vehicles, Tony can help with that, that need 24/7 access in and out of that. And so we can't prohibit any of that by waiting for like my staff to come in and do it, or to bring someone in extra and do that. It needs to be taken care of as the weather demands. So that's why we do that.
Snow removal costs money. Know that.
I'd move to receive.
Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Further questions, comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0.
Next one's District Health on page 21.
I'll move. Oh, go ahead.
Can we see, and can we see next week, if you bring back what Prairie Hills budget used to be? Let's say 3, 4, or 5 years back, is that possible?
Before we close it down?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's, I was going to move to receive district health.
Motion by Radig, second by DeWitt. Any other questions? First.
Or was it to receive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
The next one's Triview, page 29. I do have one question on this. Last year, I believe that the region, Rolling Mills, agreed to pay utilities and that up to $8,000. We have budgeted revenue. I'm not sure we're doing that this coming year. That's something we'll have to ask Dawn. I did not budget any money, because I did not even know if they would or would not.
Okay.
So I think it's something we could add in there, possibly revenue. And we need to bill them probably too. Figure that out, how we bill them, otherwise we'll get the $8, whatever the expenses are.
Do you think the utilities are high there, Kenny, at Triview, on both sides? Just as a building, generally speaking, or?
I don't. I know that question has been asked by some of the staff there, and we took a look at the numbers. It's probably been 8 months ago now, but we took a look at the numbers, and they didn't seem like they were that far out of line.
Okay.
It was built in 75, I think.
I think that's right.
Any big earth-shaking news on this one, Kenny?
No.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Radig. Last chance.
Or can I ask one question?
Yep.
I was getting nervous that we don't have a chance. Page 29. What's buildings?
Page what, Jeremy?
29.
And what was the question?
What is the line item buildings?
You actually have zero budget there.
So is that just one that'll drop off after this year?
Well, after we get through all the history too. You have to keep the history there, because you want to look at the history if you did budget something, but you have to leave 3 years there.
Okay.
Good?
Yep.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Thank you.
Sheriff?
I don't know, should we just put these last three groups off till next week?
The three funds that we review, they're all non-tax funds controlled by the sheriff. So you start with the commissaries, one fund, the prisoner rooms board, the second fund, sheriff forfeitures, the next fund. They can go to detail what they would like to, but basically it's under their control. So we'll start with the commissary fund first, I guess.
Where are we at on there?
34 is revenues, 35 is expenditures.
You got questions on it? This is the money that comes in from the inmates buying their candies, their drinks, whatever they order, stuff extra. And we get a portion of it, and the state code has a very narrow window of what we can spend. We can only spend it on inmate concerns, so mattresses, shoes, uniforms for the inmates. We can't even spend it to, if we wanted to buy a vehicle for the inmates, a transport vehicle, it's not that. It's got to be TVs. We spent money at TV. We pay for cable out of their commissary account. So very narrow window what we can do with this.
So you might hate my question, but can we stockpile some of this for like the new jails, TVs and mattresses and things?
Yes, that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, we have, I mean, you see we haven't spent much. We bought a whole bunch of mattresses, but we plan on day one, every place in there's going to have a new mattress. Now, if we have to spend that, or if it's part of the budget, that's what we can use that for.
So do you go through like a prison supply type company for those? I'm not trying, no, I just know that they're made.
Furniture?
No, I'm asking because, you know, like Serta's made in Clear Lake, Iowa, you could possibly buy direct from them.
Captain Harlow is quite the shopper.
Okay.
He'll go and look at a bunch of different companies and get the best price for what we need.
Because if you could go directly through them in Clear Lake, I don't, you know.
Yeah, I don't know where he gets them. I know
Just throwing it out there.
He looks at all sorts of different places to get the best price. And sometimes We
I mean,
need
they're probably
special-
just a foam pad, I'm guessing.
Well, sometimes we need special ones where, if we're concerned about them hiding anything, we have to buy the clear ones, so.
Oh, sure.
They're only made in certain places and things like that.
Okay.
It's a security issue, if we jack the price up and only a few people make it.
Yep.
I'll move to receive.
I'll second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. Other questions? I just can't believe they need candy and pop when their food in the jail is so outstanding.
Yeah?
I ate some, but not as a guest of the jail, but. Any other?
You were an inmate?
No, I was not a guest, no. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0.
But I do kind of find that confusing. You said I was not a guest.
I was in
That
uniform.
that suggests that maybe you
I
were
was
an
in
inmate.
That's why I asked
a
the
green
clarifying
and
question.
uniform like that one. How about that?
Okay.
Should we put this off till next week?
Next one, prison room and board, again, a non-tax fund, no tax dollars, and again, at the discretion of the sheriff. And expenditures on 37, 36 is revenues. The revenues are down, I think, because of COVID.
Not only, that's what we need to discuss. The judges' reports have changed. They went from a criminal matter, meaning if they were found guilty of their crime, then they would attack them on at the end as fees as part of the room and board. Now they've moved it to a civil, and we're under instructions from the county attorney where we put a pause on them. We're gonna do some in 60 days, but it causes more work for us because now deputies have to go out and personally serve these people because it's a civil matter. And we only have 90 days. If we can't find the person, we have to reserve them. So we're trying to see if it's cost effective to keep chasing these people down because as it is right now, some people pay, some people don't. I mean, some of our frequent flyers, they owe us $20,000, $30,000, which we're never see. But and people do come up and pay their bill. I don't want to say, you can see what we have in our balance. So the courts have changed what they've done. We don't know how this is going to shake out. This is happening to us right now. And personally, I don't have high hopes for our room and board to stay as incoming high as it is, but we'll see. We'll know more in 6 months.
And the room and board, if I'm right, I think 60% goes to this fund, 40% goes to the county. Is that the correct?
Yes, it's a 60-40
So it's really
split.
affects general basic, again, shorter revenue, and this fund here. This fund is non-tax. Actually, as of November 30th, they have 257,000, so they've been saving the money up, and again, it's used at their discretion.
We're saving this money for the new building. In case Kenny can't get us something, maybe we can help out.
It is kind of crap that we're kind of pushing the cost back to the taxpayer from the courts, you know, that, I don't know who made that decision at what level, but.
I'll let you talk about the court.
Yeah, well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I know I get you got to work with them and do everything you got to do, but I just think in the end, we're kind of making it easier to be a criminal, but that's my personal opinion. Sorry to any courts that differ.
Other questions, comments? Dennis, you have something?
I'll move to receive.
Motion by Raddick, second by DeWitt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Sheriff forfeiture 4142.
That again is non-tax fund, and basically we're just plugging the number into what money they have in the fund. You don't know how many forfeitures they're gonna get or not get. Basically get, and they increase their spending, but that's still up to the sheriff how they spend it.
TJ touched on this a little bit. In the courts have screwed down what they will accept for a forfeiture. You have to raise how much it is, and you really have to have a nexus where you can prove a lot stricter that this was drug money or this was ill-gotten gains. And again, if we don't make the traffic stops and find the money, we don't have it to seize anyway. So this one is just trying to go by past year what we come up with. It's a shot in the dark.
So does this require the conviction now too for you to have it, essentially?
Sometime, well, I guess, I mean, we'll have people that will, just walk away from it, and then maybe we may not get a conviction, but a lot of times you need a conviction. In the federal system, that's a whole nother level to go through also.
I'll move to receive.
Motion by Raddick, second by Taylor. Any other comments or questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Passes 5-0. Item H.
Okay, this one here is youth service guidance services, and it's on page 41 under the Board of Supervisors. I actually reduced this 25,000 because 2 years ago we spent 165,000. This year we have spent 47,000, but usually a lot of expenses come toward the end of the year. These are court, place, juveniles, say, Florence crib, homes like those. So we did reduce the 25,000. Again, with COVID, our expenses are probably down a little bit right now on placements, but this will probably go up by next year. So again, I reduced it 25,200 to 175,000. This is our general supplemental fund.
I'll move to receive it.
Go ahead. Motion by Raddick,
Second.
second by Ung.
So can you say that again, Dennis? I'm sorry, about what you anticipate this going up to this next year?
Down.
Down
We
to?
reduced it 25,000. Because 2 years ago, I think it's 166,000. This current year, it's down a little bit because of coronavirus. You know, placement kids in these homes, they just won't take them. And the courts are not placing them. So, with that said, this year we might gain some back in our reserves in general sub, because we budgeted 200,000, we only spent 100, we gain 100 back. But our reserves in general sub are down to 12.1%, so this would be somewhat of a blessing to get money back into the fund balances in general sub, if this comes to fruition.
Where are we at right now? I know we're at 46.
But he said most of the expenses come in at the end of the year, too.
Okay.
And the further Corona gets down the line, they'll start placing more people in these facilities.
We good? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Pass 5-0.
Okay, now we are down to emergency services, which is about 3/4 of the way through the book. The first one will be the loan fund, page 15 and 16.
It's the one we discussed earlier. The loan fund's the one we were discussing earlier.
Yes. Yes, I'm sorry. Loan fund. Yeah, we discussed this earlier, so I think that's on hold. So if you prefer, we can bypass this one, move on, until we decide what we're gonna do.
It's not my decision.
Do we need to do anything formally with that?
No, just
We've already
no
kind of
action
decided
taken.
we're going to leave it sit, so moving on to I-2 EMS training, 1819.
That again is a non-tax fund. We receive the money for training, we send the money for the training, so it's a wash, no tax dollars involved. And on this one, I think you had a question why 1 year is 13,000.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you got an extra.
Yep, and what happened there was the reimbursement came in that fiscal year, the fiscal year before. That's why it was so much that 1 year. But again, we don't spend the money until we get it. Generally speaking, and then if there's any amendments need to be done to it. And if I spend money and I don't have it, then he calls me.
I do. Where's the money?
You should.
Get
Where's
the-
the money?
And everybody in the office is like, Denny's on the phone.
And they all exit out the back door.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Raddick. Further questions, comments?
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay. Passes 5-0.
Next week, we actually start going through the operations of several departments. One will be the auditor, conservation, board of supervisors, emergency services, building services, county treasurer, human resources, and secondary roads. It's a lot in one day, so you might want to judge how you want to do this before or after, have a short meeting and start maybe meeting just a shade earlier, because these will probably take a couple hours.
Do we have a time, or is that to be determined, Mr. Chair?
Thoughts? Want to start at 3:30 again? 3? I'm not fond of these late nights like this, but it is what it is. It's part of the job.
We usually start at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but we have constraints with individuals have to work.
Right.
Sorry.
Who has to work?
I have a hard time getting here any earlier than between 3:30 and 3:45.
Is that you, Keith, that has to work?
Got to close on a coffee table. You can't leave till then, but
Well, I'm willing to buy dinner for $2.99, up to $2.99, so each of you.
3:30 next week?
Let's
do.
All right.
If you're
Can
late.
we all chip in for a pizza if we each contribute $3 or less, and we each,
How about some Starbucks? Some cold drinks, although each
3:30 next week.
$7.
3:30 next week. We are adjourned.